They thought I would cry in that courtroom when they demanded everything I owned. But with just one piece of paper, one nod from the judge, and the entire room transformed into a crime scene. They forgot I never entered battle empty-handed. My name is Harper Blake, and I spent 15 years as a signals intelligence specialist for the Federal Security Bureau. I've tracked digital ghosts across 7 continents, unraveled corporate espionage networks that stretched from Silicon Valley to Singapore, and decoded messages that prevented 3 terrorist attacks you'll never read about in the papers. But I never imagined the person who would stab me in the back would share my father's last name. The morning of the hearing, I sat in my rental car outside the Riverside County Courthouse, watching my stepmother Elaine and half-brother Brady walk up the courthouse steps like they owned the place. Elaine wore her signature black Chanel suit, the one she'd bought with Dad's money 6 months before he died. Brady strutted beside her in his expensive Italian shoes, checking his phone every few seconds like the important businessman he pretended to be. They had no idea what was coming. 8 months earlier, I'd been living quietly in a small coastal town called Riverside Haven, 3 hours north of the city. After leaving the bureau, I'd chosen anonymity over accolades, solitude over recognition. My father had died the previous year, and I'd assumed settling his estate would be straightforward. Dad had been meticulous about his finances, organized to a fault. The will was clear, everything to me, with small bequests to Elaine and Brady. But Elaine and Brady had other plans. The lawsuit hit me like a freight train. They claimed I'd manipulated Dad's signature while he was dying, that I'd exploited his weakened mental state to steal their rightful inheritance. According to their lawyers, I was an unstable former intelligence operative, paranoid and delusional from years of government work. They painted me as a daughter who'd swooped in during her father's final moments to rob his grieving family. The local media ate it up. Family fortune fight rocks Riverside, screamed the headlines. Spy daughter accused of deathbed deception. They made me sound like a villain in a Hollywood thriller, a cold-blooded operative who turned her skills against her own family. I said nothing. I gave no interviews, made no statements. I simply watched and listened, the way I'd been trained to do. And what I observed was a carefully orchestrated performance, every detail planned to perfection. The first crack in their facade appeared 3 weeks after the lawsuit was filed. I was reviewing financial documents in my father's study when my laptop chimed with an unusual email notification. Bank of International Commerce, a financial institution I'd never heard of, was thanking me for my recent withdrawal of $247,000 from what they called the Blake Family Trust account. I'd made no such withdrawal. I'd never even heard of this account. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I reached out to 2 former colleagues from the Bureau, Miles Carter, a digital forensics specialist who could trace money through the darkest corners of the global banking system, and Leah Grant, a legal analyst who understood financial crimes better than most federal prosecutors. Miles found the first thread within hours. The Blake Family Trust account had been established 6 months before Dad's death, with Elaine listed as the primary beneficiary and Brady as the secondary. Over the past year, nearly $600,000 had been systematically drained from Dad's various accounts and funneled into this trust, then dispersed to a network of shell companies and offshore accounts. Leah discovered something even more disturbing: the charitable organizations that Elaine had been publicly supporting, the ones that made her look like a grieving widow dedicating herself to good works, were fronts. The Riverside Children's Foundation, the Coastal Environmental Alliance, the Brady Blake Memorial Scholarship Fund, all of them were shells, existing only on paper, designed to launder money and hide assets. But the real revelation came when I followed the digital breadcrumbs to their final destination. The money wasn't just being stolen, it was being used to purchase information, corporate secrets, government contracts, classified research data. Brady had been selling intelligence he'd gathered through his connection to me, using his family relationship to build a network of industrial espionage. They'd turned my father's death into a business opportunity. I spent the next 3 months building an airtight case. Every bank transfer, every forged signature, Every fake charity donation was documented and verified. I recorded phone conversations using techniques I'd learned tracking terrorist communications. I photographed documents with micro cameras designed for surveillance operations. I built a timeline that would make a federal prosecutor weep with joy. The most damning evidence came from a conversation between Elaine and a financial broker named Viktor Petrov, a man I recognized from my bureau days as a suspected money launderer with ties to Eastern European organized crime. Elaine didn't know that the phone system in her lawyer's office had been compromised, that every word she spoke was being recorded and analyzed. The girl won't be a problem much longer. Elaine's voice was clear on the recording. Once we get the court order, we'll have everything transferred to the Cayman accounts by Friday. She'll be left with nothing, and she'll never be able to prove what happened. Brady's voice joined the conversation. What if she tries to use her government connections? She's been out of the game for 2 years, Elaine replied. She's isolated, paranoid, probably medicated. The court will see her as exactly what we've painted her to be. A disturbed former operative who can't let go of her delusions. They were wrong about many things, but they were right about one. I was no longer the same person who'd left the bureau. I was something much more dangerous. A highly trained intelligence operative with a personal vendetta and nothing left to lose. The night before the final hearing, I made my last preparations. I contacted Special Agent Sandra Torres at the Federal Financial Crimes Unit, a woman I'd worked with on 3 major cases during my bureau years. I explained the situation in broad strokes, careful not to reveal the full extent of my investigation. I need you to be ready tomorrow, I told her. Riverside County Courthouse, Department 7, 2 p.m. When you get my signal, you'll have everything you need to make arrests. Sandra didn't ask questions. She knew my reputation, knew that when I called, people went to prison. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully. Conservative blue suit, minimal jewelry, my hair pulled back in a professional bun. I wanted to look like the competent federal agent I'd been, not the broken woman they'd portrayed in the media. Brady and Elaine arrived at the courthouse like conquering heroes, surrounded by their legal team and followed by a small crowd of reporters. They smiled and waved, playing the part of the grieving family seeking justice against a dangerous relative. I entered through a side door, carrying only a simple leather briefcase and a single manila envelope. The courtroom was packed. Judge Patricia Hawthorne, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense proceedings, called the session to order. Brady and Elaine's lawyer, a silver-haired man named David Crenshaw, rose to deliver his opening statement. Your Honor, Crenshaw began, his voice resonating with practiced authority. We are here today to right a terrible wrong. The defendant, Harper Blake, has used her background in intelligence work to manipulate and defraud this grieving family. She has stolen their inheritance, forged documents, and exploited the trust of a dying man. He painted a picture of me as a dangerous operative who'd gone rogue, using my skills to prey on my own family. He presented forged documents that supposedly showed my father's mental deterioration, medical reports that had been doctored to suggest I'd been present during crucial moments when decisions were made. We ask the court to order the immediate return of all assets unlawfully taken by the defendant, Crenshaw concluded, and to award damages for the emotional trauma inflicted upon my clients. Judge Hawthorne looked at me expectantly. The courtroom was silent, waiting for my response. I stood slowly, picking up the manila envelope from my table. Your Honor, I have something to show you. I walked to the bench, my footsteps echoing in the silent courtroom. Judge Hawthorne looked puzzled as I handed her the envelope. What is this, Ms. Blake? Justice, Your Honor, just justice. Judge Hawthorne opened the envelope and began to read. Her expression changed from confusion to shock to cold anger as she absorbed the contents. The document was a comprehensive financial audit, complete with bank records, recorded conversations, and photographic evidence of the fraud conspiracy. The judge looked up, her eyes scanning the courtroom before settling on Elaine and Brady. I'm ordering this courtroom sealed. No one leaves until I say so. She reached for her phone and made a call. "This is Judge Hawthorne. I need federal agents at Department 7 immediately." "Yes, now." Brady leaned forward in his chair, his face pale. "What's happening?" Elaine gripped his arm, her knuckles white. "Stay calm. This is some kind of trick." The courtroom doors opened, and Special Agent Torres entered with a team of federal financial crimes investigators. They moved with the precision of a military operation, surrounding Brady and Elaine before either could react. "Brady Blake and Elaine Blake," Agent Torres announced, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and industrial espionage. You have the right to remain silent." Brady's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You can't. This isn't. Harper, you can't do this." I looked at him with the cold professionalism I'd learned during 15 years of government service. "I just did." Elaine tried to maintain her composure as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "This is a setup. She's framing us." "The evidence speaks for itself," Judge Hawthorne said, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. "The financial records, the recorded conversations, the forged documents. All of it points to a systematic fraud conspiracy that began before Mr. Blake's death and continued through these proceedings." The reporters in the gallery were frantically taking notes, their cameras capturing every moment of Brady and Elaine's arrest. The story would be front-page news by evening. Step family arrested in courthouse fraud sting. As the agents led Brady and Elaine away, Brady turned back to me one last time. "How long have you known?" I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd worn in months. "Since the day you filed the lawsuit, you forgot that I spent 15 years hunting people who thought they were smarter than the system. You were never even close to my league." The courtroom began to empty, reporters rushing to file their stories, lawyers gathering their scattered papers. Judge Hawthorne approached me as I packed my briefcase. "Ms. Blake, I owe you an apology." The court was clearly manipulated by false evidence and perjured testimony. I shook my head. "You don't owe me anything, Your Honor. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. You followed the evidence." Outside the courthouse, I walked to my car without speaking to the reporters who shouted questions at me. The October wind was cold against my face, carrying the salt smell of the ocean from Riverside Haven. In a few hours, I'd be back in my small coastal house, back to the quiet life I'd built after leaving the bureau. But as I drove away from the courthouse, I couldn't help but smile. Brady and Elaine would spend the next decade in federal prison. Their stolen money returned to Dad's estate. Their reputations destroyed. The network of shell companies they'd built would be dismantled. The money laundering operation shut down. And the industrial espionage ring they'd created would be thoroughly investigated. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't always about grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it was as simple as knowing when to stay silent, when to gather evidence, and when to place the right piece of paper in the right hands. They thought they could outmaneuver a former intelligence operative. They forgot that in my world, patience is a weapon, information is ammunition, and revenge is a dish best served with federal arrest warrants. The road back to Riverside Haven stretched ahead of me, and for the first time in months, I felt truly free. The ghosts of my past were finally at rest, and the future belonged to me alone. Sometimes justice is just a piece of paper, if you have the courage to put it in the right place at the right time.